Okay, folks, we're back. I'm your host, BKP, and what we're talking about this morning, and particularly this segment, is illegal immigration and what is going on. I now am joined by, joining us now, D.A. King. D.A. is a nationally recognized authority on immigration and president of the Dustin Inman Society and publisher of ImmigrationPoliticsGeorgia.com. D.A., how are you this morning?
Great, Brian. Always a pleasure to be with you. Thank you for having me.
Well, you know, I've been going through and I read several of your social media posts and what you have put up, and I read most of your stuff throughout the day because you do publish a lot of stuff on immigration, legal and illegal. So I was going through reading that, and I've read some of the ugly, I'll call it, Ann Coulter attacks on people as stupid as me to like the president. So anyhow, I wanted to get with you because I think you and I can have a conversation and our viewers can really take some information away. So let's start with the president chose not to use a shutdown again, okay? And let's remember the Democrats have control of the House, and obviously Mitch McConnell is not going to use the nuclear option. So to me, my opinion, it's almost like Chuck Schumer has control of the Senate. That being said, they sent a package over to the President of the United States this past Friday. He had a choice to sign this, or the government was shut down for a second time, a partial shutdown. So let's talk about that piece of legislation first. What say you on that?
Well, first, respectfully, let's eliminate the false choice between signing and the shutdown. There was a third way to do this, and I want to make it clear from the front that I support the president and secure borders. But what we could have done when the bill was put into a time machine so that it was approved in the dark of night and somebody had to do something by midnight the following day, we could have pushed for a 1 week continuing resolution so as to keep the border, to keep the government open while people had enough time to see what was really the madness that was really in that piece of legislation it was pushed through. If the public had been allowed to understand fully what was in there before it was signed, I believe we could have gotten it changed. But even if the Democrats had not agreed to a 1 week continuing resolution to keep the government open, while all concerned had a chance to read and understand every word of that legislation, it would have been a different scenario. Sometimes I wonder if the president's advisors are as, and I'm putting this mildly, as efficient as they could be. The bill itself had features in there that when I alerted people to what was in there, I was called an anti-Trump traitor by simply revealing the contents of a bill. And very quickly, you know, it was less money for a wall than the Democrats had already agreed to. It gives veto power, so to speak, to local authorities along the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, along the border, where if they don't want a fence in their community, they probably won't get a fence in their community. And those areas are governed by Democrats, some of the most liberal areas of the country. It has an amnesty in there. You can call it anything you want, but it is an amnesty for cartel smugglers in that if you are somebody who is in a household, get this now, if you are in a household related to or are part of a potential household to sponsor an unaccompanied child, then you, by the letter of the law, could not be deported and you couldn't spend any money from this bill on it. And it goes on. And it was a horrible, horrible bill. It's now in the past. It's been signed, and we have a chance to change it at the end of the fiscal year, which is September the 30th. But probably what's going to happen is they won't have a budget ready in Congress, and this will continue to go on with another. Then you'll see a continuing resolution to keep the government open while they work on another bill like this.
DA, let me ask you quickly here. Actually, one of your highlights of the bill I read on my show Friday. One of the highlights that you posted several highlights of the bill, and I did read some of the responses and so forth. And I got a little pushback myself from my viewers. Sent me some messages saying, I was wrong. The wall will get built. But the only thing I said is I am concerned if this is the one subject that does crack away a couple % of the Trump supporters, because I'm reading some really tough stuff. And before you get into that, I want to say you're 100% right, because if they'd have done 1 week, and I want to tell you how much I agree with that, if they would have done just 1 week of a continuing resolution, and it would have had enough time to read this 1,100 pages. When are we going to stop allowing Congress to give us 1,100, 2,400 page pieces of documents and sign them in 24 hours? But anyhow, I think you're right there on the mark of if we'd have had 1 week of a continuing resolution and the American people would have seen, got an opportunity to see the disaster inside this monstrosity, it would be different. And that's where you're going with that?
It is. And Brian, please know, I've been working in the Georgia State Capitol for 16 years, and this time compression, bringing out bad bills at the last minute and making people take a false choice in signing them, it's not new, and it won't end. It'll happen again next time. But the bill was horrible. It's in the past, and this language is good until September the 30th at the earliest. It can be replaced. It is my hope that the Republicans in the Senate will at least be prepared for the next time this happens. And just a little bit of inside baseball. The Republican establishment, excuse me, in the Senate was so much in a hurry to get this bill passed or signed before anybody got to see it, or before the president had changed his mind, that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, actually interrupted a speech by Charles Grassley on the floor, interrupted him to tell the room that the president had agreed to sign a bill that most people had not even yet read. So there was a great deal of insight into the amount of rush that was going on to get this thing done. My sources tell me that Senator Charles Grassley, who's been there forever, was really not happy about being interrupted.
Well, DA, let me say this, and I don't want. Let me use the tense still. Let me say still, not that you have posted anything other than your support for the president. So even after this bill this Monday morning, you still support the president of the United States?
Certainly I do, and I understand why that question has to be asked. But people have to put their loyalty first to their country and common sense, and blind loyalty to anybody, President Donald Trump included, that can lead to what's called a cult. If a politician that I support does something wrong, or that I feel is wrong, I am happy to stand up and say so. And believe it or not, to everybody, politicians are driven by the push factor. And the powers that be with the money, like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, big business, the Georgia Chamber of Commerce, have a lot more ability to push. So speaking up against a bad policy, speaking up against a bad decision, is not automatically throwing your candidate or your support out the window. And I really, really wish that, a lot of people don't know exactly how their government works, but I wish people would stop thinking that any negative comment on any policy or legislation is somehow a forever attack and abandonment of the president. It's not.
DA, I said Thursday here on the show, I let everybody know how distraught and upset and just I was just blown away that he would sign this. But I said Thursday on the show when I signed off Thursday, I said, but I'm going to be back Monday morning, and I'm going to come back to support my president of the United States.
I think that's a healthy attitude.
And that's very clear on that. Let me say this, because speaking of that, folks out there, if you're listening to the DA and myself this morning, we can be critical, and we need to be critical of our government regardless of who's in the White House and who your representative is. We need to look at that and understand how the government works. But I have stayed clear, DA, that Trump is one man. Very clear that Trump was one man. And last week we had Richard Shelby, that has been in the Senate since 1986, Okay, and in 1986, what happened in 1986? Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill's amnesty deal, 1986. Richard Shelby of 1986 came out, and Patrick Leahy from Vermont, that's been in there since mid-70s, I think it's 77 or maybe even back to 71. These two people came out and said this was a bipartisan good piece of legislation. I'm staying focused to understand that the President of the United States is one man, been there 2 years, and the problem is much bigger than Donald J. Trump.
Well, it is, and there's a reason that we have started to use the word swamp. There's people who have been there forever and put policies and tools into place that they know how to use, and that's just the way it is.
All right, he signed a national emergency Friday. The media's, their head is spinning off over the national emergency. It seems to be okay, DA, if we can build schools, bridges, roads, airport, massive multi-billion-dollar bases all around the world, but let us want to defend the southern border with a national emergency, and all you know what breaks out. What say you on the president declaring a national emergency, and what do you think the progression will be, and will it work?
I believe in the end, I think it'll probably go to the Supreme Court. I believe he will eventually be successful. Goodness knows many, many other presidents, including Barack Hussein Obama, have done national emergencies for far less important things than whether or not we are allowed to defend our southern border. Excuse me. It is important, I think, to know that this wall, this quote-unquote wall, border barrier, fence, whatever we're calling it, is not a monolithic deal that is supposed to run from California to the end of Texas. While it's important to have up barriers in many places, I hope that people will stop to understand that even if this national emergency works in getting the president more money to put up more barriers in more places, excuse me again, it's not just whether or not we're going to have a barrier in many parts of the border that is going to stop or deter illegal immigration and these wildly crazy caravans that are coming up because they have learned how to work the obscene asylum laws that we have. What we have to do, whether we get a wall, a fence, or whatever, what we must do is to stop the asylum policies. We have to change the law in Congress that allows people to come to the border and say, I'm a refugee, I am fleeing a poor country where I can't get a job, and there's gangs there, and I want to come into your country and get asylum. Once they get in, whether or not that asylum is ever approved in 6 months or 2 years from now, they're in. And if the asylum is not approved, you have to go find them to get them to leave, which mostly doesn't happen, and it's up in the 80% doesn't happen. So getting into the United States right now is the game, and once they're in, they simply blend into the illegal population and go on. And what you can look for in the near future is more marches in the street from people who said, I'm here, I have been here since 2019, and I have now had children, or I am a child and I want another DREAM Act. You can look for this to be added to the weight of the push for another amnesty, like you noticed happened in 1986.
Well, let me say this. You know, you brought up we're talking about the southern border and the topography there. Obviously, you're not going to have a 2,000-mile wall. There's only certain areas that you can actually cross that need a barrier. So that's a that's an illusion also the media creates to want people to believe when they say this border wall. But you brought up amnesty, and outside of a border wall, there's so many things that we've got to address. E-Verify, catch and release, amnesty. What are some of the other things? Because you do this on a daily basis. You do this nationally. You do this through your website that you publish. What are some of the other things before? And then after we get done with this, I want to bring it into Georgia where we're talking. We do have some national viewers, but we're going to bring it into discussing immigration in Georgia. But what are some of the other things that have to be done that we really need to be calling our legislators and say, do this?
Well, on the national level, you pretty much hit it, and we've talked about it. Changing the asylum laws, ending the catch and release is, I think, just as important as having a nationwide E-Verify program. If we had done this show 2 years ago, I would have told you that most illegal immigration is caused by illegal employment. The certainty that an illegal alien can come over here and work illegally and make more money than he can at home. Now that is changed now, because there are organized groups who are organizing caravans in Central America. And now, by the way, before I forget, there are people coming from the Middle East, I am told, in Honduras right now, getting into another caravan. But people are coming because they know they have been organized by groups whose name is Sin Fronteras, or No Borders, to come here and claim asylum. I can't say it enough. If you can say, I want asylum, you take a test, a short test about whether or not you have a credible fear of returning to your home country. And that's just a very quick test. If you're let in then for the final review on becoming an asylee, that can take 2 years. But again, you have made it into the United States. We do not now have a program that even monitors when a guest worker comes in on a legal visa to see whether or not they leave. So if we can have E-Verify nationwide, and if we can change our asylum laws to stop the madness of letting people in while they just wait to see whether or not they're going to be approved, and most of them are not, we go a long way towards stopping what's going on now. And people should know one more thing. This is not an infinite game. We cannot continue to have telephone interviews and discussions around the country or in Congress about what are we going to do to stop a massive influx of people from other countries, in addition to the legal immigration we take in. Eventually, there will be enough political power here created by the people who have been coming in for the last couple of decades and are coming in now, where we won't have a choice on whether or not somebody else is going to pass a law and get the political power to do what they want to do, and we will be sitting here wondering what happened to our country.
All right, I agree, but I do want to take something, and I know I told you earlier, but there's some things I can't pass up. I do want to take something that you said in that last statement, that, and I've thought about this multiple times, how many from the Middle East are traveling to Honduras to become a part of a caravan, to walk up through there with 10,000 people, not be suspected, and trying to cross this border even to get asylum as though they've come from Honduras. And one of the media groups yesterday on This Week on ABC, they say Trump's claim invasion of criminals, gang members, and then they say the actual number is only 4% that come across are convicted of a crime, only 0.1% affiliated with a gang. What's wrong with these people? They don't realize all we need is that one person to get through that should not be here. But this is okay because only 4%, according to their numbers, is getting through that are convicted of a crime. Why is 4% okay? I don't know. I can go all day.
Well, it's whether or not you believe the accuracy of those numbers, I guess, is up to the amount of trust people have in the media in general. For me, the mainstream media gets that rating for trust is nearly zero. But I can make a suggestion. If people will go on Twitter, and a lot of people don't, but there's an organization called the Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org, which has a man on the border right now doing stories about who he interviews and who he sees apprehended coming over the border. And apprehension now is a funny word because people turn themselves in. But people from the Middle East are, in fact, coming over in these caravans. And another thing, very quickly, Brian, people hear about caravan. These are groups of organized people that the media covers. The media is not telling you how many people just come through on their own. Every day, a long stream of people. You can turn on YouTube for the Center for Immigration Studies, and you can see people streaming in, mostly of families who are just lining up and coming over the border. They didn't come in a organized, advertised caravan. But every day we are taking in, I read someplace the other day, and I might not have remembered it correctly, but somewhere around 1,800 people a day are coming in just in one place in Texas. And they walk in, Border Patrol sets them up, lines them up, puts them in, and then they go ask for asylum, and then they're released. 3% of unaccompanied children have ever been removed from this country who come over that border.
What was the Twitter feed that you put up a minute ago before I go on?
It's called the Center for Immigration Studies, CIS.org.
All right.
Or you can follow Mark S. Krikorian. Mark Krikorian, he's got a man named Todd Bensman on the border right now. When we get off, I'll send it to you and you can put it out. How's that?
I definitely will. I want to do that. Okay, now let's. You live in Georgia, and I didn't tell the guest here. DA does live here in Georgia, and so let's bring immigration down to our state here, where most of our viewers are listening from. And what are some of the things going on in Georgia, and where do we stand on illegal immigration in the state?
Brian, I've been working in the Georgia State Capitol on illegal immigration since 2004. So I don't know how easily the American public is shocked anymore, but here's one that shocked me, and I didn't find this out. I didn't see this number until last year. But Georgia right now, according to multiple sources, both on the right and the left, or you can make that both on the pro-enforcement side and the anti-enforcement side, Georgia is home to more illegal aliens than it is green card holders. Now, when I saw that, it just blew me away. Though if it doesn't freak people out as it should, Georgia is also home to more illegal aliens than is the border state of Arizona. We have corporate-funded groups in Georgia who are right now, as I speak, in the Georgia Capitol, lobbying against any effort that would reduce legislation that would reduce illegal immigration in Georgia. There are young people, some of them lobbying in the Georgia Capitol are illegal aliens. They are young people who are here illegally who have been given Obama's deferred action on deportation. They're still illegal aliens, but the government has promised not to deport them. Georgia has corporate-funded entities who are lobbying in the Georgia Capitol, controlled by the Republicans, successfully to stop or deter legislation every single year that would lead to less illegal immigration in Georgia. Here's another one. Right now, the people who have deferred action on deportation, whether or not they have it through Obama's DACA program, they are illegal aliens, but under the Real ID Act, they are afforded the ability, not the promise, but the ability to obtain a Georgia driver's license because they get a Social Security number and a work permit. So fast forward, what kind of driver's license are we issuing now? About 22,000 driver's licenses to people who are illegal aliens. What does that driver's license look like? It looks exactly like, it is exactly the same driver's license that we are giving to legal immigrants who have obeyed our law and come over here the right way and had their fingerprints taken and are chasing the American dream. It's the same driver's license that we're giving to Mercedes-Benz and Kia executives who are here on guest worker visas. We're giving illegal aliens the same driver's license as legal immigrants. I can't say it enough. There's been a push on in the Capitol for years to try to not give them a driver's license at all. That did not pass. But what we're trying, and we have been trying for years, is to at least change the driver's license that's given to illegal aliens, again, about 22,000 of them with deferred action on deportation, so that it clearly says that they are not illegal immigrants, so that it's very visibly different than the driver's license we're giving to legal immigrants, and that it's oriented vertically and it's multi different colors, and it says not a U.S. citizen. Right now in Georgia, here's one. Right now in Georgia, our election laws say that the license that is issued to all of these non-citizens I just talked about is acceptable as proper identification at the poll booth. When you go to vote,
I was waiting for you to get
license
there.
Is proper ID. And most legislators do not know this. And when you tell them, it goes way too close to the topic of immigration, and they'll back away.
Well, I was actually waiting for you to get there. I was following along, and I said, okay, everything about this, you know, all the things that are wrong about it up to this point, but what about, you know, voting and voter fraud? It's interesting, you know, just a little shot here. Democrats don't seem to be concerned with voter fraud when it's in some areas, or the possible voter fraud with some areas. They're more concerned with what they perceive as not getting the ability to vote, voter suppression. But having a driver's license that looks like yours and mine, and walking into a lot of these polling places and pulling provisional ballots, I think it's already been proved that that's happened.
Well, let me make this extremely clear, and let me take it a minute. If everybody's listening in Georgia will call their state representative, whether it's a Democrat or a Republican, not all these legislators have backed away, as I may have implied. There is a pending bill, House Bill 270, House Bill 270. House Bill 270 very easily corrects the flaw in the state law on proper identification at the voting booth. It makes it clear that documents, credentials like ID cards and driver's license issued to non-citizens shall not be acceptable as proper ID at the polls. And that sounds like a no-brainer, but it's not guaranteed that this bill will pass. But I would urge everybody to tell their state representative to sign on to, not to say, yes, I support it, to put their name on House Bill 270.
DA, I'm going to have to close, but before I do want to get one more thing in. When a new governor takes over, the plate that they have in front of them is very full. A lot of campaign promises, and then a lot of the representatives coming and wanting to get their bills up front that the governor will support. That being said, Brian Kemp, the new governor of Georgia, how do you think he's doing on immigration? Is he looking at it? Are these some of the things that you and others are able to get in front of him right now? What say you?
Brian, I have to be honest. I'm looking forward to a new governor, Brian Kemp, mentioning illegal immigration. I have, maybe I missed it, but I haven't heard the governor move on illegal immigration since he's been there, and our session is nearly half over. So I don't know how to answer that question other than I'm listening, and I look forward to the governor saying something about the issue.
Well, he made the campaign promise, and I know he didn't go too deep into illegal immigration, but his campaign promise was, supporting ICE, which, there you go, supporting ICE, and a task force to, eliminate gangs, and, the majority of that surrounds illegal immigration. So I was just wondering on any of those fronts if he was making any progress or headway or anything that you were able to see.
I have to apologize for an alarm going off on this phone, but I honestly have not heard the governor mention illegal immigration. Again, maybe I missed it. Since he's been elected, I have not heard that.
DA, I appreciate you very much. Thank you for the time. And let's do this again real soon, because obviously
thank you very much, Brian. Good work.
This is a subject that is going to stay in the forefront. You have a nice day, sir. All right, that's DA King. DA King again one more time. Let me make sure I have this for you here. He is a nationally recognized authority on immigration and president of the Dustin Inman Society and publisher of Immigration Politics Georgia.com. So there's great information on his website there. We're going to take a break. We're going to come back. We're going to unpack that, but I have some opinions on some things that are taking place where immigration, the wall, the courts, national emergency. We'll talk about it right on the other side of this break. Take us a break, Lonnie.